All right, welcome to another deep dive. We've got a fascinating mix of source material to explore this time. It seems like we're going to be talking about everything from science and tourist attractions to the impact of the travel industry as a whole.
Sounds like quite a journey. I'm interested to see what connections we uncover along the way.
Well, why don't we start with the science bit? You've given us some excerpts from a discussion about science education, and the first question is pretty straightforward. Did you like studying science when you were at school? Why or why not? What jumps out at you from the response?
Well, the initial feeling that comes across is one of disconnect. The person describes science as being too theoretical and hard to relate to, which is a pretty common sentiment, I think. It's like they couldn't quite bridge the gap between those scientific concepts and their own everyday life. And when you add to that a teaching style that's described as dry and monotonous, it's not hard to see why the spark might have fizzled out.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, when you're just presented with a bunch of facts and figures, it's easy to lose sight of the wonder and excitement that science can actually hold.
Exactly. It becomes more about rote memorization than about cultivating that natural curiosity and the desire to explore. Which brings us to the next question. What do you remember about your science teachers at school? It sounds like those memories didn't exactly help to counter that feeling of disconnect.
No, not really. The person talks about teachers being strict and inflexible, more focused on memorization over creative thinking. They even use the word robotic at one point, which suggests a learning environment that wasn't exactly conducive to asking questions or trying to think outside the box.
And that's kind of ironic, isn't it? Because science is all about asking questions, pushing boundaries, and exploring new ideas. But if the learning environment doesn't foster that kind of thinking, it's easy to see how science can end up feeling more like a chore than a fascinating journey of discovery. It's almost like the human element was missing from the equation.
That's a great point. But luckily, it seems like perspectives can change because the next question is, how interested are you in science now? Why or why not? And here we get a really interesting example of how that spark can be reignited even years later.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting. The person mentions the movie Interstellar as being a catalyst for their renewed interest in science. Specifically, they talk about the scene where the astronauts land on a planet orbiting a black hole and the mind-bending concept of time dilation, where 2 hours on that planet is equivalent to 23 years back on Earth.
Okay, so even though that's a pretty extreme example, it's rooted in real science, right? I mean, that
Yeah.
whole idea of gravity warping time is based on Einstein's theory of relativity.
Right. And while the movie obviously takes some creative liberties, that underlying principle is something that physicists have been studying and verifying for decades. But what's so striking about this example is how it shows that even complex scientific concepts can become captivating when they're presented in a way that captures our imagination. It's like suddenly those abstract ideas become tangible and almost visceral. It's not just about crunching numbers anymore. It's about grappling with the very nature of reality.
Absolutely. It definitely makes you realize that the way scientific information is presented can make all the difference in whether it sparks our curiosity or just goes in one ear and out the other. Which leads us to the final question in this science section. What do you think has been an important recent scientific development? Why? And the answer focuses on a couple of fields that are really pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Yeah, neuroscience and AI. The person specifically talks about the potential of AI to act as an omniscient tutor available 24/7, which is a pretty mind-blowing concept when you think about it. I mean, imagine having access to a resource that can answer any question you have at any time in a way that's tailored to your specific learning style.
That's definitely a game changer. And it kind of brings us full circle, doesn't it? From those somewhat uninspiring science classes to the potential of technology to revolutionize how we learn and interact with information. All right, that's a pretty fascinating evolution of perspectives in that first bit of source material. But now we are going to shift gears completely. You've also provided us with some information about a recommended tourist attraction. The prompt is this. Describe a tourist attraction in your country that you would recommend. You should say what the tourist attraction is, where in your country this tourist attraction is, what visitors can see and do at this tourist attraction, and explain why you would recommend this tourist attraction. Let's hear about this recommendation.
So the recommendation is for the CN Tower, which is located in Toronto, Canada. And I think it's a great choice because it's more than just a tall building. It's become a true icon, instantly recognizable around the world.
And it's located right in downtown Toronto, so it's super easy to get to if you're already exploring the city. But what makes it stand out as a must-see attraction?
Well, for one thing, there's the revolving restaurant. Imagine having dinner while the entire city slowly rotates around you. It's a 360-degree panoramic view, constantly changing. And it's just a really unique and memorable experience, especially if you're visiting Toronto for the first time.
That sounds pretty incredible, but what about for visitors who are a bit more adventurous? Is there anything for them?
Oh yeah, definitely. They have the edge walk, where you can actually walk on the outside edge of the tower hundreds of meters above the ground.
Hold on, walk on the outside edge. I'm getting a bit queasy just thinking about it.
It's definitely not for the faint at heart, but even though you're securely harnessed, it's still an incredibly exhilarating experience, and the views from up there are just breathtaking.
I can only imagine. Okay, so we've got fine dining with a view and a heart-stopping walk around the edge. Anything else that makes this tower special?
Well, there's also the glass floor inside the tower, where you can stand and look straight down to the ground below.
Yeah, I've been on a few of those before, and it's always a bit of a weird sensation. Like, even though you know it's perfectly safe, there's still that little part of your brain that's screaming, danger!
Exactly. It plays with your perception of height and space in a really interesting way. Plus, it's a great spot for taking those dramatic photos that really capture the scale of the tower. It really adds another dimension to the whole experience.
So overall, what is it about the CN Tower that makes it such a highly recommended tourist attraction? What makes it stand out from all the other tall buildings and observation decks out there?
I think it's the way it combines the excitement and energy of the city with a sense of awe and wonder. You're not just looking at the city from a distance. You're experiencing it from a completely different perspective. And because it offers such a variety of things to do, it really appeals to a wide range of people, families, couples, thrill seekers. There's something there for everyone. It's a great example of an attraction that really captures the essence of a city.
I like that. It sounds like more than just a tourist trap. It's a real experience. Okay, well, we've scaled the heights of the CN Tower, so let's come back down to earth a bit and look at our final set of topics. This time, we're going to be talking about museums, art galleries, and the holiday industry. The first question from your sources: what are the most popular museums and art galleries in your area? What does the answer say?
It mentions two main ones, the Royal Ontario Museum, or ROM, and the Art Gallery of Ontario, which they call the AGO. And both of them are really well known for different reasons. The ROM has a huge collection of natural history exhibits, including those dinosaur skeletons that everyone loves.
Oh yeah, the dinosaurs are always a big hit. But what about the AGO? What kind of art do they have there?
Well, the AGO has a mix of classic and contemporary art, with a special focus on Canadian artists. They've got some really iconic works from the Group of Seven, which is a group of landscape painters who were really influential in the early 20th century. And it seems like these two museums, the ROM and the AGO, really play a big role in the local cultural scene.
That makes sense. But the next question throws a bit of a curveball into the mix. It asks, do you believe that all museums and art galleries should be free? Now, that's a topic that always sparks a good debate.
Yeah, it does. And the source material actually makes a good point about the financial realities of running these institutions.
Hmm.
I mean, think about all the costs involved. Maintaining the collections, putting on exhibitions, paying staff, keeping everything secure, it all adds up.
Right. And while making museums and art galleries free for everyone sounds great in theory, in practice, it might not be so sustainable.
Exactly. But there are other ways to make them more accessible, like offering free admission on certain days or giving discounts to students and seniors. It's all about finding that balance between making culture available to everyone or also ensuring that these institutions can continue to thrive.
Now that we talked about the financial side of things, what about the visitor experience itself? The next question asks, what kinds of things make a museum or art gallery an interesting place to visit?
I love this question because it really gets to the heart of why we visit these places in the first place. It's not just about looking at objects or paintings, it's about the stories behind them. The source actually gives a couple of great examples, like imagining Van Gogh's struggles while looking at one of his paintings, or understanding how people actually used ancient artifacts in their daily lives. It's about bringing history and art to life, making those connections that make the experience feel real and relevant.
I completely agree. It's those moments where you feel a spark of connection, a sense of wonder that really stick with you long after you've left the museum. But now let's shift our focus to the holiday industry. The first question in this section asks, why do you think do some people book package holidays rather than traveling independently? What are some of the reasons given?
Well, the main reason seems to be convenience. For a lot of people, the idea of planning an entire trip from scratch can be overwhelming. So package holidays offer a one-stop shop where everything is taken care of, flights, accommodation, sometimes even meals and excursions. And that can be really appealing, especially if you're traveling to a new place or if you just want a hassle-free vacation. It removes a lot of the uncertainty and potential stress of traveling, particularly for those who might not be as comfortable with the unknowns of independent travel.
That makes total sense. Especially in today's world where everyone is so busy, sometimes you just want to relax and not have to worry about every little detail. But then the next question asks, would you say that large numbers of tourists cause problems for local people? And this is where things start to get a bit more complex.
Yeah, the source specifically mentions the example of Japan, where the huge influx of tourists in recent years has led to some problems, especially in cities like Kyoto. Locals complain about overcrowding on public transportation, long lines at popular sites, and just a general sense that their city is being overrun by visitors.
I can imagine that it would get pretty frustrating having to navigate those crowds and deal with the disruption to your daily routine.
Right. And it raises some important questions about how to balance the economic benefits of tourism with the needs and well-being of the people who actually live in these places. It's about finding ways to manage tourism so that it benefits everyone, not just the industry itself.
Now that we've talked about the impact on local communities, the last question focuses on the environmental consequences. It asks, what sort of impact can large holiday resorts have on the environment?
Unfortunately, the example given is Bali, which has experienced some of the negative effects of rapid tourism development. We're talking deforestation to make way for resorts, increased plastic pollution, strain on local water resources, and damage to fragile ecosystems like coral reefs and mangroves. It's a stark reminder that tourism needs to be managed carefully if we want to protect the places we visit.
It's a good point. We often think about the excitement of travel, but it's important to remember that our choices as tourists can have a real impact on the places we visit. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it seems like we've covered a lot of ground. From those early memories of science class to the awe-inspiring heights of the CN Tower and the complex realities of the holiday industry, we've really explored a diverse range of topics.
And hopefully this has given you, our listeners, some new perspectives and insights to consider. It's always fascinating to delve into these topics and see how they all connect.
Absolutely. And it leaves us with a final thought. How do we make sure that we're not just consuming information and experiences, but truly engaging with them in a meaningful way? Whether it's finding that spark of curiosity in science, being mindful travelers, or appreciating the stories behind the art we see, it's about approaching the world with a sense of wonder and a desire to learn and grow. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you